Good morning, everybody. It is now Wednesday, May 6th, and we are going to continue our notes on Prince and the Pauper and the background of the Tudors. I talked about this yesterday. I gave Joe Isaac a little shout out. The Tudor rose. So that's the red rose and the white rose that they put together to make the Tudor rose. Joe Isaac actually gave me a coin from England and it's 2 shillings. So it's actually about a dime, but their dimes are very big, which I think is cool. But on the back, so on the front is Queen Elizabeth, and on the back, if you can actually see, you can see it a little bit better when the screen's smaller, but on the back in the middle is the Tudor rose. So when I share my screen, you can actually see it a little bit better. We're going to keep going with our notes, and we left off on this slide on who were the Tudors. So let's go to present. All right, we left off on this page. There's this family called the Tudors, and that's the red and white rose, the Tudor rose, and I think you can actually see it a little bit better now. Yeah, I think you can. And so that's on the back of their coin. It's a very famous symbol of England. So who were the Tudors featured in The Prince and the Pauper? And if you don't have your notes packet out, you know, the thing that I gave you that looks like this, that says keep it home, notes packet, we're on the second page. We're going to start right here, King Henry VIII. Who are the Tudors featured in The Prince and the Pauper? Well, the first one was King Henry VIII. He is an extremely famous person throughout history. He's a very interesting historical figure. And I mean, they're still talking about him. There was a musical made recently about him and his wives. So yeah, King Henry VIII, very famous, and most notably for not being that nice of a guy and having 6 wives. So his first wife was Catherine of Aragon, and she was from a province in the north of Spain. And they were married. It was a political alliance, and she gave birth to a daughter named Mary. And this is a big deal at that time, because at this time in England's history, you needed to be, you needed a guy. You needed to have a boy be your heir, meaning somebody to inherit your throne. And he wanted a son, not a daughter. And so when Catherine gave birth to a daughter, Mary, he was mad. And he didn't want to have a wife who couldn't give him a son, like she had any control over that. So he wanted to divorce her. But at this point in time in England, they were under the Catholic Church. So England was a Christian nation, and they were Catholic. And in Catholicism, if anybody knows their background on Catholicism, you can't divorce. You just can't. And so instead of him, you know, saying, well, maybe next time she could give me a son or all of that, he just decided, you know what, Catholic Church, I really want to divorce her. So I'm actually going to just skip out of the Catholic Church, and I'm going to create my own. And he did. He created what is now called the Church of England, which is still the faith of England. And it is it's Christian. It's not like a whole different type of religion. It is just not Catholic. So they are not under the Catholic Church anymore. He started his own church called the Church of England, or the Anglican Church. And he was the head of the Church of England, and he said, yep, divorces are allowed in the Church of England, or the Anglican Church. And so he divorced her. Here you go, problem solver, right? He's a very interesting figure. I strongly recommend that you continue to do some additional research on Henry VIII. He's fascinating. So his second wife was named Anne Boleyn, and Anne Boleyn gave birth to a girl as well, and her name was Elizabeth. She will become very famous. And through a lot of drama and palace intrigue, if you will, Henry charged her with treason, and she was sentenced to death. He beheaded her, got rid of Anne Boleyn, and that made him free to marry again. And he married Jane Seymour, and now Jane Seymour gave him a son named Henry VI. Nope, that's not his name. Edward VI, excuse me. So he finally got his son. But she died very, very quickly after she gave birth to Edward. At this time and throughout most of human history, childbirth has been an extremely dangerous endeavor, and many times women did not survive the process. And so Jane Seymour died 12 days after giving birth to Edward VI. Henry VIII then had 3 more wives, but he didn't have any more children. So we're gonna actually talk about his kids later in our slideshow, but we have Mary, Elizabeth, and then Edward, the youngest. And here's a quick, easy way to remember the fate, how all 6 of Henry's wives ended up: divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. So yeah, the only wife of Henry that was not, didn't come to a not so great end was actually his last wife. She survived him because he died a little bit early. And we'll find out actually about that in our reading. Okay, again, Henry VIII, very interesting guy. I highly recommend doing some research. Okay, the next person on our list is Edward VI. And he took the crown after his father, Henry VIII, died in 1547. So even though he was the youngest, remember I said it was really important to have a male heir. They were the primary person who would inherit the throne. England has changed that rule. So if the eldest child is a female, that person would inherit the throne. It doesn't have to be a boy anymore. But King Henry VIII died in 1547, and he took on the throne. But he was only king for 6 years. So he was king when he was 10 years old. He actually died right before his 16th birthday. And we're not exactly sure, but it's either tuberculosis or a respiratory infection. So some sort of chest issue. But yeah, so he did not reign for very long. And he is a primary character in our story that we'll be reading. Again, always, always, always pause if need to, because I'm going to keep going. Now, those 2 women, or 2 females, his older sisters that I said we were going to come back to, here they are, Lady Elizabeth and Lady Mary. So Lady Elizabeth and Lady Mary. Excuse me. Mary was Henry's first child, born of Catherine of Aragon. So when I said that they were no longer part of the Catholic Church, they would be, we'll just stick with the term Protestant. And so she was not a fan of the Protestant faith. She was a Catholic, and she was not happy that he divorced her mom and by starting his own church. And once Edward passed away, she was the first one to be declared queen. So once the male heir passes, it goes to the eldest child regardless. And so she was the eldest, and it went to her after Edward died. And she was nicknamed Bloody Mary, actually. She was very strong in her Catholic convictions, and she wasn't afraid of being bloody about it. So she originally got the nickname Bloody Mary after condemning 3 men to be burned at the stake for plotting against her. Like I said, drama, palace intrigue. But she also was not very kind toward Protestants, those who were not of the Catholic faith. And now, because there were Catholic people and Protestants in England, that was a source of conflict throughout history. So Elizabeth was Henry's 2nd child, born of Anne Boleyn. And when Mary was queen, Elizabeth was imprisoned in the Tower. There's this thing called the Tower of London, and she was imprisoned in the Tower for a while. But then Mary died, and so Elizabeth became queen. This was Elizabeth I, and the later years of her reign are sometimes referred to as the Golden Age in England. And that's actually the Elizabethan era. When Shakespeare was writing, that's the Elizabethan time. The way that they speak during Julius Caesar, that's Elizabethan. That is when Queen Elizabeth I was queen. Okay, so it goes, King Henry VIII dies, Edward VI, then Mary, and then Elizabeth. And Elizabeth actually reigned for an extremely long time and never married. She's interesting in that way. Then there's another character we're going to meet, and her name is Lady Jane Grey. And Grey with an E is the British spelling. Grey with an A, like our color, is the American spelling. That's the only difference. So Lady Jane Grey was the niece of Henry VIII. She was actually almost named successor to the throne, but she was overthrown by Mary. Bloody Mary. But Lady Jane was also convicted of treason and beheaded. This happened a lot at this time. Being beheaded was pretty popular, and usually the reason that you were beheaded was treason, and that meant anything that they could make up that meant you were plotting against the throne. So lots of drama at this time. There are two other important figures, and these are true historical figures, by the way. This is just like Julius Caesar. This is just like Julius Caesar, which is real people, but made up details. So big picture stuff, all of the people that we're talking about really existed in history. They really lived. But the conversations they have and all of the little details of the story, that's creative and that's made up. So it is what we call historical fiction. So just like Shakespeare with Julius Caesar, those were real people and real events. The details were, made up, or the dialogue. Same too for this story. So Earl of Hertford and Duke of Norfolk are both real people, but the actions that they'll take in our text are, we don't know. I mean, they're made up by Mark Twain. They're from his head. So there's Earl of Hertford, and in our book he'll be known as Lord Hertford, and it's Hart like Hartford, not Hertford. That's just how England does things like that. So it's Hartford, like a heart. And he is the son of the Duke of Norfolk, and he is assigned to help teach Edward how to be a king. And that's because, remember, he was only 10 years old when he became king. But later, seems like the fate of a lot of people, he was accused by enemies of treason, of course, what else would it be, and was also beheaded. Then there is his father, the Duke of Norfolk, and he is the uncle of Catherine Howard and Anne Boleyn, two of Henry's wives. So Henry actually had two Catherines as wives. He was put into prison for suspicion of treason, like they all are apparently. And actually in the story, one of the things we're going to find out is that Henry VIII is absolutely obsessed with having him killed. Like, it is not enough that he has been in prison for treason. He's like, I need that guy dead. Remember, Henry VIII was not that nice of a guy, and at this time, it was not that strange to imprison or behead your enemies, as you can see. So, lots of drama. Tudor England is an extremely interesting period in time. It can get a little confusing because there's all these families that are like intermarrying, but it's pretty cool. So, that's the end of our notes for today. See? We're at the end of our notes here. You have these notes here as well. There are the slides. Now, you could actually start filling out a little bit of your character sheet if you would like. You don't have to. You can wait until we start reading, which we'll do tomorrow. But if you are like, oh, that might be good information for me to write down for King Henry VIII, father of Edward VI, or Edward Tudor. So when we say the Tudor family, because they're royalty, they're not really often referred to by their last name. They're just their first name, like Henry VIII. You don't need to say Henry Tudor or Henry VIII Tudor. They just don't do that. But his name is actually Edward Tudor, his son, or Edward VI. But yeah, so we're going to start reading tomorrow. I'm really excited. We will be reading chapters 1 and 2. They are very short, which is why we're reading chapters 1 and 2 together. Chapter 1 is a page, and then chapter 2 is like 5 pages. And starting tomorrow, I'm going to be providing an audio version for you to listen to while you're reading. So my expectation is that you're actually reading along in your book, and the version that you'll have will only be audio, like there won't be anything on the screen. But yeah, we are done with Tuesday and Wednesday. Tomorrow is Thursday. We begin reading, and tomorrow's homework, because you don't have homework tonight, tomorrow's homework is in this packet, and it is right here, chapter 1 and chapter 2. Ta-da! All right. You have a wonderful rest of your day. Happy Wednesday, and I will see you right here tomorrow. Bye, guys. Miss you.